Hello and welcome. My name is Vineet Malhotra and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories from today. Israeli airstrikes have killed a senior Hamas official in the Gaza Strip. Political leader Salah al-Bardawil and his wife were killed in the southern city of Khan Yunis. This comes as the Israeli army orders Gazans to evacuate part of the southern city of Rafah. And Istanbul court has formally placed the city's opposition leader under arrest on charges of corruption. His detention has sparked some of Turkey's worst unrest in over a decade. In Sudan, at least 45 people have been killed in a paramilitary attack in North Darfur. In the past hour, RSF shelling has killed a further 3 civilians in the Omdurman region. An Israeli airstrike, in this coastal city of Tyre in Lebanon, killed at least one person. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam says his country is at risk of being thrown into a new war as dozens of airstrikes kill at least 5 others. Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff has dismissed Keir Starmer's plan for an international force to support a ceasefire in Ukraine. In an interview with Tucker Carlson, Witkoff said that he does not regard Putin as a bad guy and described him as super smart. And after 5 weeks, Pope Francis is set to be discharged from the hospital today. He will make his first public appearance today after he was admitted on a severe respiratory infection that resulted in double pneumonia. Israel opposition leader calls for a general strike of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, refuses to obey a Supreme Court decision freezing the government's dismissal of the security chief. This comes as thousands of Israelis protest the dismissal of Shin Bet chief. And wildfires in South Korea kill 4 and displace hundreds from their homes. Firefighters are scrambling to control the blaze in the country's south. All right, starting with our top story, in a significant escalation, Israeli airstrikes in southern Gaza have killed senior Hamas political leader Salah al-Bardawil and his wife. And according to Hamas officials, the strikes, which are a part of Israel's intensified military operations, have resulted in substantial casualties, including many women and children, leading to international calls for a ceasefire as the humanitarian situation deteriorates. Concurrently, the Palestinian political landscape is in flux as Fatah called on its Islamist rivals in the Hamas terror group to relinquish power in the Gaza Strip. They said so in order to safeguard the existence of Palestinians in the coastal enclave. Fatah spokesperson Monter al-Hayek said Hamas must show compassion for Gaza, its children, women and men. Fatah spokesman Monter Hayek also, in fact, reiterated the same. In Israel, political tensions have risen following Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's dismissal of Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar. Netanyahu asserts that the decision stems from Bar's handling of the October 2023 attacks, denying any connection to an ongoing investigation into the alleged ties between the Prime Minister's office and the Qatari government. Here's what Prime Minister Netanyahu said in his official statement.
לא יישאר ראש השב"כ, לא תהיה מלחמת אחים, וישראל תישאר מדינה דמוקרטית.
Well, the dismissal has sparked widespread protests, with the opposition leaders calling for a general strike, expressing concerns over potential threats to Israel's democratic principle. Let's take a look at what the protesters had to say.
סבלנו מלחמות, כבר ניסינו את זה שנים, ראינו שזה לא עובד. מה עוד מלחמה מעבר ל1,000 שכבר עשינו תוביל עכשיו, עוד מבצע, עוד... אז אולי נעשה משהו אחר, אולי משהו אחר צריך לעזור. אז אני מנסה לעשות משהו אחר כמיטב יכולתי כאזרחית במדינה.
Well, these developments underscore the complex and volatile dynamics in the region, with significant implications for both domestic politics and international relations. Well, Ambassador Daniel Carman, former ambassador of Israel to India, is joining us to talk more about this. Ambassador, appreciate you joining us. Well, your thoughts on this recent upheaval, if we can call it, Netanyahu firing Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar, and the kind of response that he has been met with back home?
Well, thank you for mentioning this very dire crisis, constitutional crisis, I would say, in which Israel is in the middle of, as we now speak. For a civil servant or a former civil servant who has proudly represented all Israeli governments throughout the last 45 years, I must tell you that these times are very difficult for us as citizens, but also as foreign diplomats who had as one of the assets that we were so proud to share with the world is Israel's democracy. And as someone who has left the service and is a very concerned citizen like so many others, I can tell you that we are in a very complicated situation within Israel, notwithstanding and not speaking about the external dangers Israel is facing, and you mentioned only some of them. We are very worried, and I'm talking about a popular upheaval, not necessarily an opposition. It's not a partisan quarrel that we have. It's not only the opposition. Doesn't have to do with this or that party within Israel's politics. What we are seeing is a danger to the most basic principles of governance that for some time now we're talking about the constitutional revolution that started two years ago and more, stopped or halted because of the war that we were forced to engage in after the 7th of October, with all the atrocities that we have suffered in the 7th of October. But it seems that parallel to the war and to our defense of our security needs and our people, the government has continued slowly but surely through the parliament in putting all sorts of rules and laws that are endangering the very basics of Israel's democracy. You mentioned the chief of the Shin Bet. The chief of the Shin Bet took responsibility, part of his angle of the responsibility to what happened in the 7th of October, as we were not ready to face the fierce, terrible attack by Hamas. But the issue is not would he leave his office or not. He already said that he would leave his office when some of his engagements will be over. But what we see is the fact that there is a tendency, there is a decision by the government, by the prime minister, to fire both the Shin Bet and the Attorney General, which constitute, as I said before, and I'm not going to go into the details, which constitute a danger and danger to the very basics of democracy. And this is what we are facing as we now speak. And really, it's so hard for us to think that way and to speak that way, but this is the situation we are in now.
Mr. Carmen, there's also, this talk about the Israeli society at this point in time being extremely divided when it comes to, handling of this war and this situation. And with this latest removal, there is a possibility that Mr. Bar is going to take this case to the court. He has said that he feels that this is unconstitutional. He was, very adroit in basically trying to reach that ceasefire with Hamas, which none of the other people around him could do. What do you think means when you say that this is likely to impact the internal thread which binds Israel against Hamas?
Well, I'm not sure it would be Mr. Bar who would go to the High Court of Justice, but organizations, civil rights organizations, political organizations, popular organizations, who see as the main issue, the maintenance of as I said before, separation of power, not firing the gatekeepers. How can you continue to maintain a safe and sound and healthy democracy while preventing the separation of power and harming the gatekeepers? The gatekeepers are there in order to be sure that the democracy is maintained. And unfortunately, the dismissal, which has not happened yet because there are complaints, and it is going to the High Court of Justice, and the Attorney General's dismissal, which is really something unbelievable when you think of it, without doing any due process of rule and of law. We're talking about checks and balances like in any other democracy, and we cannot lose it. We cannot lose it because one of the main assets of the state of Israel is its democracy. And it's very, very, very dangerous. And you were right. The Israeli society is divided. It's not. I cannot tell you in numbers, but the Israeli society is definitely divided.
Sir, appreciate you took out the time and spoke to us, and thank you for those perspectives and those clarifications as well. Thank you so much. Moving on, well, a large-scale Russian drone attack on Kyiv has killed at least 3 people, including a 5-year-old child. The strike caused fires in high-rise buildings across the capital, and the attack comes just hours before key diplomatic talks in Saudi Arabia, where experts from Ukraine, Russia and the US are set to discuss Black Sea shipping security. Meanwhile, tensions continue to rise as former Trump envoy Steve Witkoff dismissed UK leader Sir Keir Starmer's ceasefire proposal for Ukraine, calling it simplistic. In a controversial interview, Witkoff also praised Russian President Vladimir Putin, claiming he was super smart and that Ukraine was a false country. On the front lines, Russian forces claim to have struck Ukrainian military infrastructure, including airfields and ammunition depots. Ukrainian forces, however, say they successfully targeted a Russian command post in Belgorod. Mr. Daniel Wagner, CEO of Country Risk Solutions, is joining us at this point in time. Mr. Wagner, appreciate you joining us and thank you so much. Well, some controversial statements being made there by Mr. Witkoff. It begins to appear as the Americans are starting to consider Russia as one of their allies, and Europe, and for that matter the United Kingdom, is headed on a different path altogether. This is very, very obfuscating. It's very, very confusing, but at the same time, no substantial results have come out since the day Donald Trump took over. He was confident that he would snap his fingers and this war would be over, but it's obviously more than that.
That's for sure. In the current situation we're finding ourselves in, day is night and white is black. Everything has been turned upside down, and at this point in time, the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine are all jockeying for position ahead of these Saudi talks, and what I think the U.S. is trying to do is keep its options open for negotiating, and it's going to continue to praise Mr. Putin and Russia, and it's going to continue to cast a wary eye on Zelensky and Ukraine, and it's going to try to craft a solution in its own making. It seems pretty clear that Mr. Trump would like to have the parties adopt a solution that he thought of, rather than what Keir Starmer or other parties might think of. What we don't know, of course, is what Mr. Witkoff had discussed with Mr. Putin. What we can presume is that Mr. Putin is not exactly ready to go to the negotiating table yet. And I don't see any reason why he would be in a hurry to do that. If you consider his positioning, right now, Ukraine is very much a question mark from the U.S. position. And Mr. Putin sees an opportunity to perhaps gain some more ground. And as the financing scenario remains uncertain for Ukraine, he's going to play this out for quite some time, I think, before we get to any serious negotiations.
What do you think, this means for the optimism that has been exuded by the Americans when it comes to striking peace between Ukraine and Russia? Do you think that's going to take a hit? Because obviously, there are elements in the European Union as well that feel that it's Russia that's the oppressor, it's Russia that should be brought down to its knees, and it's the other thing that's happening. It's Ukraine that is being condescended right now.
So what the Trump administration is trying to do is, of course, buddy up with Mr. Putin and butter him up in the process. But my view is that that's unlikely to yield the result that they're looking for in the time frame that they're looking for. Ultimately, the idea of having some sort of alliance or at a minimum a friendly relationship with Russia may not be a bad approach to getting to the negotiating table and coming up with a reasonable solution. But at the end of the day, Mr. Putin is going to want things done his way. So the question I find myself asking is Mr. Trump going to get his way, or is Mr. Putin going to get his way? And if someone is going to blink, who's going to blink first? And how are these two men going to both claim victory if both of them want to have it their way? I think that's a question we're going to see play out in the coming weeks and possibly even months.
All right, Daniel, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for your perspective. All right, moving on. Well, the death toll from Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon has risen to at least 7, including a child victim. This follows a second wave of attacks on Hezbollah targets. Tyre, which is a major city in southern Lebanon, and it saw one person being killed with several others wounded in nearby strikes. The escalation comes after rocket fire from southern Lebanon into northern Israel, which Hezbollah has denied responsibility for. Israeli forces have intensified their military operations, with Defense Minister Israel Katz confirming strikes targeting Hezbollah positions. Prime Minister Nawaf Salam warned that Israel's renewed military operations could pull Lebanon into a new war. The Lebanese army is investigating the rocket fire, while Hezbollah faces increasing internal and external pressures. Lebanon's political opposition has blamed Hezbollah for instigating last year's Israeli offensive with its support for Gaza. These developments highlight growing tensions along the southern border as Israel and Hezbollah remain locked in a volatile standoff, with both sides accusing each other of escalating the conflict. Yeshaya Rosenman, Israel journalist, is joining us at this point in time as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Yeshaya. Important to understand that if any of these countries are blaming Israel for this escalation, it should be made very, very clear that after October 7th, it came out pretty much in the open that the proxy wars that have been going on against Israel have been, to some extent, or rather to a large extent, precipitated by the funding that comes out of these countries.
Good afternoon. So first of all, I don't actually understand how Israel can be blamed for the escalation. I think it's quite clear who fired rockets at who, Lebanon and Israel, and not vice versa. When the Lebanese Prime Minister warns that Israel might be drawing the region into escalation, there is a decision 1701 that says that there should be, Hezbollah must be disarmed beyond the north of the Litani River, and the Lebanese government is essentially completely doing nothing at all. They prefer Israel takes care of Hezbollah rather than themselves because of Hezbollah's very substantial power as a militia that controls Lebanon. But yes, you are correct that beyond all these, what the outcome will be right now, the most important part is the long-term outcome. And that is dependent upon the funding coming from Iran. Because even if now Israel were to take out every last missile that Hezbollah owns, and some of the strikes that Israel did last night can be found online on the right Telegram channels, they exploded a very large weapons cache that Hezbollah had. You can see the secondary explosions. But even if Israel was to take out every single missile that Hezbollah has, they would just simply rearm from Iran once more. So the question of how to deal with this once and for all, how to take down the Iranian regime, I don't see very many people discussing that.
Right, and Yeshaya, do you take solace in the fact that the Americans have already understood that how Iran is perhaps, the biggest actor in this area when it comes to this upheaval and these proxy wars?
Correct. All of the proxies, what the Iranians call the Ring of Fire around Israel, they're all Iranian funded, even if not exclusively Iranian funded, since Qatar also funds these terrorist activities. But yes, the Houthis get their missiles from Iran, Hezbollah gets its weapons from Iran and from China, Hamas gets their weapons from Iran. So yes, it is primarily the largest funder of terrorist activities in this region. The main force destabilizing this region is Iran, and that is precisely the reason that the traditional monarchies of the Sunni world collaborate with Israel, because they realize that the greatest threat to their existence is not Israel, but Iran, correct, but the revolutionary project of Iran, yes.
Yusha, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for
Thank you very much.
those expert insights. All right, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world. Thank you so much.